I call up Philip and I tell him like, hey, I think I want to go back to skating.
And I said, oh, that's fun.
Oh, she?
And I thought like, oh, you want to do collegiate competitions? And she goes, no, I want to compete again. And I said, let me call you back. I go and I grab a bottle of red wine and I open that bottle and I pour myself a really big glass.
And are you thinking this is a terrible idea?
This is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Terrible idea. 2.5 hours later of conversation with me trying to talk her out of it. And everything I said, like, oh, I said, other people have tried this and it was hard because they're older. She goes, I'm only 18.
The arena lights were glowing brighter than ever. But for Alysa Liu, this moment felt different. The crowd was loud, cameras were flashing from every angle, and somewhere behind the boards, her coaches were already watching every tiny movement she made. Not just as trainers, not just as professionals, but almost like proud parents seeing years of sacrifice unfold in real time. And this time, the microphones caught everything. From nervous whispers before the music started, to emotional reactions after the final pose, fans finally got to hear what usually stays hidden behind the scenes. The tension started long before Alysa even stepped onto the ice. Backstage, her coaches stood close together near the monitor, trying to stay calm. One of them kept adjusting the headset while staring toward the tunnel entrance. The other folded his arms tightly, barely blinking, because they knew exactly how important this skate was. A clean program, one coach quietly muttered. That's all she needs. The camera then cut to Alysa warming up. Small movements, sharp breathing, eyes completely focused. But what viewers didn't realize was how much pressure had built up before this exact performance. Over the past few seasons, Alysa's journey had been filled with ups and downs that almost nobody expected. Injuries, doubts, burnout, online criticism, and endless questions from fans wondering if she could ever return to her peak form again. Some people even believed her best days were already behind her. But inside that arena, her coaches believed something completely different. She's ready, one whispered confidently. The music finally began echoing across the rink. And instantly, silence took over the building. Alysa glided onto the ice with unbelievable control. Every movement looked calm, but behind the scenes, her coaches were already reacting to every edge, every turn, every setup. Nice speed, good extension. Come on, stay centered. The microphones picked up every nervous comment. Then came the first major jumping pass. Her coach leaned forward immediately. Up! Alysa launched into the jump perfectly. Clean landing. The coaches exploded instantly. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. One coach even slapped the barrier so hard nearby spectators turned around. But they couldn't celebrate for long. The program had only just begun. As the choreography continued, Alysa's expression completely transformed. She no longer looked nervous. She looked fearless. And honestly, fans watching online started noticing it too. Social media immediately began flooding with reactions. She looks different tonight. That confidence is back. This is the Alysa we missed. Meanwhile, her coaches still refused to relax. Stay patient, one repeated over and over, because in figure skating, one tiny mistake can destroy an entire performance in seconds. Then came the combination sequence, probably the most stressful moment of the program. The coach grabbed the railing tightly. She needs this. Alysa entered the setup with incredible speed. Takeoff, rotation, landing, then immediately into the second jump. Clean again. The reaction behind the boards was unbelievable. Oh my gosh, she did it. One coach literally started pacing in circles while laughing nervously. And suddenly, the energy inside the entire arena shifted. The audience could feel something special happening. Even the commentators started sounding shocked. This may be one of the strongest short programs we've seen from Alysa Liu in a very long time, but the microphones kept revealing even more emotional moments from her coaching team. At one point, during a slower artistic section, the cameras showed one coach quietly saying, "She's fighting for every point. And honestly, that sentence explained everything. Because this performance wasn't just about medals anymore. It was about proving something. Proving she still belonged among the best. Proving the comeback was real. Proving the critics wrong. Every spin became sharper. Every transition became smoother. And with each passing second, the coaches became more emotional. You could actually hear the disbelief in their voices. She's locked in. She's completely locked in. Then came the final jumping pass. The entire program basically depended on this moment. A tiny mistake here could still ruin everything. One coach stopped talking entirely. The other whispered, "Come on, Alysa." She entered the jump. Perfect timing, huge height, and another clean landing. The crowd erupted. Not polite applause, not casual cheering, an actual explosion of noise. People jumped to their feet before the program was even over. And behind the boards, the coaches completely lost control emotionally. "Let's go. That's IT. She did it." One of them covered his face with both hands for a second, almost like he couldn't believe what he had just watched. But Alysa still had a few seconds left. And somehow, she made the ending even better. Her final spin accelerated faster and faster until the music suddenly stopped. Final pose. Silence for half a second. Then the arena absolutely exploded. Fans screamed louder than they had all night. The coaches were clapping immediately, smiling so hard they almost looked relieved more than excited. Because they knew how hard she fought to get back here. And the microphones captured one final emotional sentence before Alysa even left the ice. "That's the athlete we always believed in." The camera followed Alysa as she skated toward the exit tunnel, breathing heavily but smiling for the first time all night. She looked exhausted, but also proud. As she disappeared behind the curtain, fans online started replaying moments instantly. Not just the jumps, not just the score potential, but the raw emotions from her coaches. Because hearing those real-time reactions changed everything. It reminded people that figure skating isn't only about technical scores or rankings. It's about pressure, fear, trust, and years of hard work finally paying off in a few unforgettable minutes. Back near the monitor, the coaches were still trying to process what had happened. One laughed nervously and said, "I think my heart stopped during that combo." The other shook his head. She knew exactly what she was doing tonight. Then suddenly, everyone turned toward the scoreboard. Because now came the scariest part of all. The scores. The entire arena waited nervously. Alysa sat beside her coaches in the kiss and cry area, still catching her breath. Her hands were shaking slightly. One coach leaned toward her. "No matter what happens." That was incredible. But deep down, they all wanted the same thing. A huge score. Something that would officially announce to the world that Alysa Liu was truly back. The screen flickered. Numbers started appearing. And the reaction that came next, nobody expected. The entire arena froze as the numbers slowly began loading onto the screen. Even the commentators stopped talking for a second. You could hear scattered screams from fans somewhere in the crowd, but near the kiss and cry area, everything suddenly felt painfully quiet. Alysa Liu stared directly at the scoreboard without blinking. One coach leaned forward. The other crossed his fingers tightly. Then, the score appeared, and instantly, the entire building erupted. Alyssa's eyes widened in shock. Her coaches jumped up at the exact same time. "Yes! Oh my gosh! That's huge!" One coach actually grabbed Alysa by the shoulders while laughing uncontrollably. The other pointed toward the scoreboard like he still couldn't believe the number was real. Because this wasn't just a good score. This was a statement. A massive one. The kind of score that tells every competitor in the event, she's here to win. The crowd continued cheering while Alysa covered her mouth in disbelief. For a second, she looked emotional enough to cry, but instead she just laughed nervously and shook her head. The microphones caught her quietly saying, "Really?" One coach answered instantly, "Yes, really." And honestly, fans online completely lost their minds. Clips from the mic'd-up footage started spreading everywhere within minutes. People weren't only reacting to the performance anymore. They were reacting to the emotions, to the pressure, to the humanity behind everything. One viral comment said, "You can literally hear how much these coaches care about her." Another wrote, "This feels bigger than skating." And maybe that's exactly why this moment connected with so many people. Because for years, figure skating fans had watched Alysa grow up under impossible expectations. From becoming one of the youngest stars in the sport, to carrying enormous pressure every single season, to eventually stepping away when everything became too overwhelming. A lot of athletes never fully recover after that. Some disappear quietly, others return but never look the same again. But tonight looked different. Backstage, reporters were already discussing the possibility that this could become one of the defining comeback performances of the season. Meanwhile, Alysa and her coaches were still processing what had just happened. The camera followed them into the hallway behind the rink. And this is where the microphones captured one of the most emotional exchanges of the entire night. One coach looked directly at Alysa and said, "You trusted yourself today. Not great jumps, not great score, not good technique. You trusted yourself." Alysa smiled quietly after hearing that. And honestly, that sentence explained more than any scoreboard ever could. Because confidence had been one of the biggest battles of her career recently. When athletes struggle publicly, fans usually only see the mistakes. But coaches see something completely different. They see the frustration during practice, the exhausted training sessions, the mental pressure, the moments where athletes stop believing in themselves. And according to the mic'd-up reactions, Alysa's coaches had been fighting to rebuild that confidence for a long time. As they walked through the corridor, one coach suddenly laughed and said, "I thought the combo was gone for a second." Alysa immediately replied, "So did I." Everyone started laughing. It was one of the first moments all night where the tension finally disappeared. But the competition still wasn't over. Not even close. Because after a huge short program, expectations become even more dangerous. Now everyone would be watching her. Every skater backstage had already seen the score. And suddenly, Alysa wasn't just another competitor anymore. She became the person to beat. The pressure completely changed. Back inside the arena, commentators began analyzing every detail of her performance. This may be the strongest mental performance we've seen from Alysa Liu in years. She looked calm from beginning to end. The technical control was exceptional tonight. But what really grabbed attention online was the coaches' live reactions during the skate. Fans kept replaying the same moments over and over. The nervous whispers before jumps, the panicked reactions during combinations, the pure relief after clean landings. It gave viewers a rare look into how emotionally intense figure skating really is. Because despite the elegance audiences see on the ice, behind the scenes, coaches are basically surviving a heart attack every 30 seconds. And Alysa's team was no exception. One funny moment from the footage quickly went viral. Right before one difficult element, a coach quietly whispered, "Please don't scare me like this." After Alysa landed it perfectly, the same coach screamed so loudly nearby fans started laughing. Social media loved it instantly. But underneath the funny moments, there was something deeper happening. People could see the trust between Alysa and her coaches. Not fake camera-friendly reactions. Real emotion, real stress, real belief. That authenticity made the entire performance feel even more powerful. Later that evening, Alysa returned to the practice area for a light cool-down session. The arena was quieter now, but cameras still followed her everywhere. One coach skated beside her slowly while discussing tiny details from the program. "You rushed slightly into the spin entrance." Alysa nodded. "I felt that." Then the coach smiled. But honestly, nobody cared after that performance. They both laughed. Even after a massive score, they were still analyzing details like perfectionists. That's the reality of elite sports. One amazing performance never guarantees the next one. And they all knew the free skate would be even harder. Longer program, more difficult jumps, more chances for mistakes, more pressure. But for the first time in a long time, Alysa looked genuinely relaxed. Not because the competition was finished, but because she had proven something important to herself. She could still deliver under pressure. As the night continued, more athletes finished their performances, but Alyssa's score stayed near the top. Every time another competitor fell short, fans inside the arena reacted louder. The possibility of a major result became more real with every minute. Back in the lounge area, Alysa watched the remaining skaters carefully on a small monitor. Her coaches stood nearby discussing scores quietly. Then suddenly, one of them turned toward her and said, "You know what tonight reminded me of?" Alysa looked up curiously. "What?" The coach smiled. "When you first started skating, before all the pressure." For a second, Alysa didn't respond. Then she laughed softly. "That long ago?" But the coach shook his head. "No, I mean the joy." That sentence hit differently, because somewhere along the way, many fans felt the sport had stopped looking fun for Alysa. The pressure became the story. The expectations became the story. The criticism became the story. But tonight, for the first time in a while, the skating became the story again. And that may have mattered more than the score itself. Eventually, the standings became official. Alysa remained near the top, heading into the next stage of competition. Photographers crowded around immediately. Reporters started shouting questions. "How confident are you now? Did this feel like a comeback performance? What changed mentally for you?" Alysa smiled politely but stayed calm. Then she gave a short answer that surprised people. "I just wanted to skate freely again." Simple, but powerful. And behind her, the coaches looked prouder than ever, because they understood exactly how difficult that freedom had been to recover. But while fans celebrated online and highlights spread across social media, something else was happening quietly behind the scenes. The pressure for the free skate was already building. And according to people close to the team, the hardest moment of the entire competition hadn't even happened yet. By the next morning, the entire skating world was talking about Alysa Liu. Her short program clips were everywhere. Sports pages, reaction channels, fan edits. Even people who normally didn't watch figure skating were suddenly sharing the mic'd-up moments from her coaches. The emotional reactions had turned a great performance into something unforgettable. But inside the arena the next day, nobody cared about viral clips anymore. Now came the free skate, the real battle. And honestly, this was the part that terrified everyone most. Because in figure skating, a strong short program creates massive expectations. Suddenly, every movement matters even more. One mistake can erase everything you worked for the night before. And Alysa knew it. Backstage, the atmosphere felt completely different from the previous event. Less excitement, more tension. Her coaches looked serious from the moment they arrived. One reviewed notes quietly on a clipboard while the other watched warm-ups from across the rink without saying much. The microphones still captured everything. "Stay patient today. Don't force rotations. She doesn't need to prove anything." That last sentence stood out immediately, because after the huge short program, many athletes would feel pressure to skate bigger, faster, harder. But Alysa's coaches understood the danger of chasing perfection. They wanted control, calmness, trust. As warm-ups continued, Alysa looked focused but noticeably quieter than before. She stretched near the boards while other skaters practiced massive jumps around her. The noise inside the rink felt chaotic. Blades scraping ice, music overlapping, coaches shouting instructions, fans screaming names from the stands. But Alysa stayed locked in mentally. At one point, the camera zoomed close enough to catch her taking a deep breath before whispering something to herself. One coach noticed immediately. "You good?" Alysa nodded once. "Yeah." But honestly, everybody could feel the nerves, because this performance carried enormous weight now. A medal was possible. A major comeback story was possible. And suddenly the expectations from fans became overwhelming again. The announcer finally called her name. The crowd exploded instantly, much louder than during the short program. People weren't just excited anymore. They were emotionally invested. As Alysa skated toward center ice, her coaches stood quietly near the boards. No jokes this time, No nervous laughter, just complete focus. Then the music began. The opening choreography looked sharp immediately. Elegant, controlled, confident. One coach whispered, "Good start." Then came the first jump. Massive height, clean landing, instant reaction from behind the boards. Yes, beautiful. The second jumping pass arrived quickly after that. Again clean. The crowd started getting louder with every successful element. And the coaches? They were already panicking emotionally. "You're kidding me? She's on today?" But the free skate is long, much longer than the short program. And everyone knew the difficult moments were still coming. Halfway through the performance, Alysa prepared for one of her hardest combinations of the night. The exact kind of element capable of changing the entire competition. One coach grabbed the barrier tightly. "Come on." Takeoff. Rotation. The landing looked slightly unstable for half a second, but she saved it. The coaches exploded. Huge save. Oh my gosh. Even Alysa herself looked surprised she held onto the landing. The audience roared loudly in appreciation, because fans love perfection, but they love resilience even more. And that save instantly became one of the defining moments of the night. From that point forward, the energy inside the building completely shifted. People started believing something special was happening again. Commentators sounded shocked. "She refuses to break under pressure." That recovery may have saved the entire program. Meanwhile, the microphones continued capturing emotional reactions from the coaching team every few seconds. "Stay calm. You've got this. One element at a time." It almost sounded like they were trying to survive the performance themselves. Then came the final minute. And honestly, this is where Alysa looked strongest. Most athletes start fading physically near the end of long programs. The jumps become tighter. The skating slows down. But Alysa somehow looked freer. Bigger movements, more confidence, more emotion. One coach suddenly smiled and said, "She knows." The other nodded immediately. She knows she's doing it, and you could feel it too. Alysa wasn't skating cautiously anymore. She was performing, fighting, owning the moment completely. Then came the final spin sequence. The crowd started clapping with the music. Faster, louder, more intense. The entire arena was fully behind her now. And when the music finally stopped, the reaction was unbelievable. People jumped to their feet instantly, screaming, cheering. Some fans were literally crying. Her coaches completely lost control emotionally. "Let's go. She did it again. I cannot believe this." One coach actually turned away from the ice for a second with both hands on his head like the stress had finally become too much. Meanwhile, Alysa stood frozen in her final pose, breathing heavily while thousands of people screamed around her. Then slowly, she smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a relieved smile, a real one. The kind fans hadn't seen consistently from her in a very long time. As she skated toward the exit tunnel, the coaches hugged her immediately. "You fought for every second of that. I'm so proud of you." And then came one final mic'd-up moment that hit fans harder than anything else all weekend. Alysa quietly asked, "Was it enough?" One coach answered instantly, "That was more than enough." Back in the kiss and cry area, the tension returned again. Everyone stared toward the scoreboard. Fans inside the arena started chanting her name softly. "Alysa, Alysa, Alysa." The camera showed Alysa trying to stay calm, but her hands were shaking again just like after the short program. One coach leaned closer and whispered, "No matter what score comes up, remember this feeling." Then the numbers appeared. The arena erupted. Another massive score. Alysa covered her face immediately in complete disbelief while her coaches screamed louder than ever all weekend. "She did it. That's incredible. This is unbelievable." The audience stood clapping for what felt like forever. And in that moment, it became clear this wasn't only about placements or medals anymore. It was about redemption, about rediscovering joy, about proving that pressure doesn't always win. As cameras followed Alysa during victory interviews later that night, Reporters kept asking about the scores, the rankings, and the comeback narrative. But Alysa gave a much simpler answer. "I'm happy I enjoyed skating again." That line spread across social media almost instantly, because after everything she'd been through, that sentence meant more than any medal ever could. And honestly, the mic'd-up footage made the entire story even more emotional. Fans didn't just see a skater landing jumps. They saw coaches believing in someone through difficult moments. They saw pressure in real time, fear in real time, relief in real time, and most importantly, they saw an athlete finding herself again in front of the entire world. By the end of the night, clips from the event had millions of views online. But one specific moment kept replaying everywhere. Not a jump, not the score, not even the final celebration. It was the coach quietly saying, "That's the athlete we always believed in." And after watching everything unfold, nobody doubted it anymore.